Hello and welcome back to Magnetic Masculinity Podcast, where we provide men with practical tools and strategies to bridge the gap between achievement and fulfillment so that they can live their most magnetic lives. Today we're talking about an interesting topic that I'm not sure many of the listeners have ever heard of, or maybe thought of, which is what is it to be a multidimensional man? And maybe we can start with what is multidimensional man and probably go from there.
Great, welcome. So the multi-dimensional man, because we're focusing this podcast to the divine masculine, the men out there that want to grow and evolve and be those evolutionary leaders and live their most magnetic lives, it's helpful for us to reframe things. So the way I use the term multidimensional is as we're evolving in consciousness on this planet, we are having to expand our awareness, our understanding, and therefore our models of existence that help us expand into our full potential. So when I say multidimensional, it can be very confusing and we could go very woo-woo with it. Or we could keep it quite simple. You've probably heard the term mind, body, spirit. If you've ever been to a yoga class or gone to anything like that, you know the term mind, body, spirit. We want to be in cohesion, mind, body, spirit. But we are multidimensional beings. We are mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional beings. People might refer to this partially as your higher self. So in some of the newer theories of physics and models for reality that we might be in a simulation, which I definitely agree with from my own personal experience, not from learning. So you shouldn't necessarily believe something you haven't experienced. But we would have our soul, people might call that is currently incarnated as a human. People might call that your higher self. People often say, I'm asking my higher self for guidance. That would be the person playing the game. That would be, we're multidimensional. We're here in the third dimension. And we have the part of us that never dies, the part of us that just changes form from this physical form to another physical form. So therefore, we would be multidimensional. So as we expand our understanding of reality and science and mysticism reach this sort of coming together that they are at this snapshot in evolution, understanding our multidimensionality, whether we want to get super esoteric and talk about the simulation and talk about our higher self and our parallel selves. To keep it simple, we can look at ourselves as we are mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional. We are also comprised of different parts. We're multidimensional, right? We have the part of us that's like, I want this thing, and the part of us that's like, we're not worthy, or what if that doesn't work? Or we have our inner child. We have all of those different parts. If you refer back to our episode on parts work, that could be very helpful to understand that. So just starting to look at ourselves as a multidimensional being can be very helpful in cultivating discernment and mastery of knowing when to use which tool for which job. And what I mean by that is I wrote a post this week on my socials about using the right tool for the right job. So some people believe that everything that happens to us is physical. I am in pain because I drank too much. I don't drink coffee, but because I drank too much coffee and I have a genetic predisposition to heart disease. Now I have heart disease. Some people might look at heart disease and say, heart disease is because your heart broken and your heart's not open, or that heart battery isn't charged. Some people can look at that heart disease and say it's because you're stressing all the time and you're causing cortisol and you're thinking thoughts that are creating tension. So things might be mental, spiritual, physical, or mental, physical, spiritual, or emotional at the root cause. All of those bodies, if we wanted to call them that, all those parts of ourselves work together. They all influence each other. But when we think in this multidimensional model, which is actually what the vehicle of consciousness is designed to do, mental, Spiritual, that's our connection to everything. Physical, that's our body, our avatar. Emotional, that's our emotional navigation system, and our heart battery is my way of tying this in and helping us try to start thinking in bigger models that are also simple, that allow us to more quickly diagnose and assess when something is wrong and pick the right tool for the right job. So is this experience that I do not prefer in my reality caused because of an untrue thought? Is it caused because I'm putting McDonald's and coffee and alcohol and fried foods and skipping meals into my avatar and my gas tank is low? Are my thoughts creating an emotional reaction in my body that's increasing my cortisol, that's impacting my organs? Or is my heart broken and I'm not charging that battery with source, which is our spiritual connection? So that's why I created the vehicle of consciousness metaphor, to take some of these giant complex ideas, put them into a very easy to follow model so that we start adopting a more multidimensional way of living in this reality that we're understanding is much more than we once believed through scientific materialism or religion or Newtonian paradigms. It's sort of combining those things together, taking the best of each and empowering ourselves to pilot that vehicle of consciousness on our authentic alignment to live our most magnetic multidimensional lives. That was a lot. Does that make sense?
Question here would be for men listening who might be a bit more skeptical about this. What would be the importance of this, or the practical use of even like caring about it or being curious about it or looking into it or understanding it?
Well, I think any man that's listening to this is probably an evolutionary leader. So I commend you for even being here and being curious. And if you're skeptical, great. I think skepticism is really healthy and a sign of intellect, as is open-mindedness. So we want a bit of open-mindedness and a bit of skepticism. But you could think of, let's go back to our vehicle of consciousness, which is my way of creating a multidimensional metaphor that allows it to be more easy to understand these concepts. Say you have a challenge with your thinking. No amount of going to the gym, no amount of finding romantic partners is going to do the job. So this type of thinking and this line of inquiry and metacognition and exploration of like, hey, which system in my vehicle is broken? Which system is a bit offline, helps us to more quickly and efficiently navigate when something is not optimal. Otherwise, what we could be doing sometimes is putting our hand on hot stove, putting burn cream on, then putting our hand on the hot stove. You know, the burn cream might help, but we also want to figure out how to turn off the hot stove. So if the car is out of gas, it's not going to matter if you put new upholstery in it. It's not going to get it on the road. You know, I say things like there's no amount of breath work that's going to help you heal your attachment styles in the container of your relationship. There's no amount of eating healthy that's going to help you heal your attachment wounds. There's no amount of meditating that's going to help you practice conscious communication skills. And there's no amount of breath work, meditating, yoga, reading books, or workshops that are going to help you reduce your stress at the law firm if your authentic alignment is completely different than that. So using these models that we've created for the magnetic masculinity blueprint that you and I together have been walking men through, a different word for that would be the multidimensional man. It's understanding that we are more than just, I am living in my body, and then when this body dies, I'm done. It's just sort of more expanding out and understanding a different model for reality. And we want to evolve because dinosaurs didn't survive. We don't want to be a dinosaur. We want to thrive. We want to experience our full potential. And that means challenging our old models.
I think question here would be with these dimensions, what would be, because I feel like some people might have that question, what would be more important one or better to start to look at? Because I think it's hard to address all of them or look into all of them or try to understand all of them. Which ones would be better to start with or to look into? Or yeah, I like the question, like which one is more important?
Whew. Well, I think they're all important, and it depends on what your challenge or what your goal is. Because again, I can't answer that without knowing what your goal is, what your wants, needs, boundaries, and values are, where you want to go. But if people go back to our Magnetic Masculinity Blueprint podcast and listen from beginning to end, you and I did follow a very specific structure that I think is important. I think it's really important that we eat our shit sandwiches, or aka shadow work or blind spot work. That's how we level up in this simulation or game. But I don't think we should do that until our heart battery is charged. Because otherwise we're going to be increasing the shame that caused the lousy behaviors in the first place. So I think that you can never practice enough compassion. And I love self-compassion. And I also love radical compassion, and starting to cultivate that. I prefer that term, which a lot of people agree with, that I also align with. It's not just my idea, but that I prefer self-compassion over self-love. Because self-love, we have all these conditions of like, in order to be worthy of love, you have to be this, you have to be that. But compassion is just like something that we can all access. And I think that having that baseline of compassion for ourselves makes us more compassionate to others. And then we're going to be less in ego, we're going to be less triggered, and it's going to be easier to assess the software of the mind. And when we have a lot of self-compassion and self-love, we make better choices of what goes into our vehicle. And our emotional navigation system is more likely to take us in line with that self-compassion or that self-care or that self-love or that forgiveness or whatever you can access at that time first. And that understanding, that radical compassion for yourself, compassion for others that might have impacted or hurt you, and compassion for those that you might have impacted or hurt. I like to ask myself questions like, in what way am I mirroring or mimicking the behavior of those that have hurt me? So I take a path of extreme accountability, but I do it from a place of curiosity and self-compassion. So I'm achieving from a place of acceptance, appreciation for myself, love or compassion for myself, and therefore my changes are just from a very different energy. So if I had to pick one, I'd say get that heart battery online.
And also with higher self, does everybody has a higher self? And with that, how can men identify it, or why would be so important to know that you have it, or even like connect with it, or how you can connect with it? So like, do we all have higher self, and what's the importance of it? Why we should bother even like knowing that it is or that it exists,
Yeah, that's a great
super
question.
simple.
And you always ask the best questions. So from my experience, because I was born with some pre-incarnation memories, to me, the idea of reincarnating, consciousness being fundamental, and us having a temporary human experience is what I have experienced. I've also had near-death experiences. I've spent months in meditation, in complete sobriety, where I did not speak or communicate with other people, sometimes for weeks or months. And I reached bliss or samadhi states where my vehicle of consciousness, the supercomputer, was very well connected to the World Wide Web, which would be consciousness, God, source, the universe. So if we looked at ourselves as droplets of the ocean of consciousness, or children of God Pick your metaphor. If you prefer science metaphors, science is all about consciousness now. And if you prefer religious metaphors, that's valid. Whatever God is to you, that's great. These are just metaphors, remember, right? That help us understand. So if you and I are different fractals of source consciousness, and we choose to come in and incarnate in order to have fun, experience the third dimensional reality where we have these physical bodies and all these chemical reactions that allow us to create our own experience, where we think a thought, the brain supercomputer goes, okay, boop, here's what that would feel like, here's what actions we're going to take, and we create this third dimensional reality that's very different than how we are when we're non-physically incarnated. Your higher self is the one who's playing the game. So if Source didn't give us free will, it wouldn't be growing and expanding, and think of Big Bang, chaos, entropy. It wouldn't be coming back together to one if it was playing all the characters. So let's say your higher self is in a different dimension than this third dimension, but it's sort of overseeing you in this game. A lot of times we look for guardian angels, which we might have, we definitely have guardian teams, or we definitely have teams that are like kind of cheering us on. But our best guardian angel is our higher self, but it doesn't want to interfere with our game too much. And sometimes when it does want to interfere, or it does want to give us messages, which it's constantly communicating to us, we dismiss it, we avoid it, or we don't hear it because we're so busy with our vehicle of consciousness and our brain. We might be a little disconnected. If that heart battery isn't charged, we're not necessarily as connected to the World Wide Web. We're on dial-up rather than fiber optic. That's why people meditate, right? When they meditate and all the thoughts come away, the wisdom, the intuition, a lot of billionaires and thought leaders and game changers have attributed their success to wisdom, information that does not come from within them. So that is that connection to your intuition, to your higher self, to the part, the more meta perspective of yourself that sees things a lot differently and in more of a connected state than our ego that we need in order to be separate, because we are both connected and individual. We're multidimensional beings. We're both. This is an and reality. That's another part of the multidimensional man, is understanding we're an and. So you can feel like this and this. Your higher perspective can be very valid, and your human perspective can be like, screw that, I don't care. This guy's a jerk, and we can have our little human meltdowns. So yeah, does that answer your question?
I have a follow-up question. Oh yeah. So follow-up question there would be, maybe some men listening might be thinking that, well, if I have higher self, then my higher self, because it's my higher self, specifically for me, should care about me. And I shouldn't be in the place that I am at, that I'm not happy with, in whatever the dimensions of that, like, multidimensional person that I might be. What would be your answer to that? Because naturally we would assume if it's our higher self, it should care for us and it would want the best for us, and our life might not reflect that necessarily.
Great question. So remember I said we're droplets of the ocean of consciousness, or children of God, or fractals of the system of consciousness, or units of consciousness. Pick your metaphor. They're all valid. That means you are God. You're not here. You're God. I'm God. We're all God. We are all divinity. We are all divine spiritual beings having a human experience. And we are all wanting the system to come from separation back to more togetherness. Or as Tom Campbell, who will be speaking, a NASA physicist who will be speaking with us next week, would say, we're trying to lower entropy, which is a measure of chaos. So we are energy, but right now we're energy moving like this, and we want to become energy moving like this, right? We don't want to have static in our signal. Our job is to grow up. Our job is to go from Look at evolution. We've gone from kindergarten to, I don't know, maybe we're in grade 4 now. So we've gone from kindergarten to grade 4. This is a hero's journey. So your higher self doesn't see you having suboptimal experiences as bad or wrong. When I was in states of samadhi or bliss or enlightenment or whatever metaphor you prefer to call them, through meditation and living out in a forest for years, it seemed very clear to me when I zoomed out and looked down from that perspective that they're all just lessons. There's no wrong way to play the game. But when we forget that we are divine, when we forget we are powerful, we use our power to create a reality that is reflective of our thoughts, our past, our emotional navigation system, and our heart battery. And because we're such a pain avoidant species and a change avoidant species, we often stuff ourselves into these inauthentic boxes, okay? And we don't make a lot of change. So the universe or our higher self will be like, hey, remember that thing you wanted to do? Poke, poke, poke. You want to heal and grow. That means you need to know where all your wounds or your rough edges are. Here's one, but we feel as, ow, you hurt me. And I'm going to just keep doing the same thing and blame that person and not take accountability. I'm a victim. And then it's going to go poke, poke, poke. And we're going to go, ow, the universe is punishing me. Brutal. My life sucks. No fair. And eventually we can either make growth and alignment and our most magnetic life a priority, and we can achieve that through excitement and self-compassion, or our higher self will lovingly allow us to create our experience as divine creators and will lovingly hope that things get so uncomfortable that the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of finally going, okay, fine, I'll make some changes. Right? Because we are here to learn, to grow, and we are all parts of source that is here to learn and grow and experience itself in this physical matter reality. So our higher self has a very different perspective and often is sending us clues and hints and nudges, but we're just like, la, 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 we're not listening because we're running suboptimal software of the mind. We're fueling, again, everybody that's listening, please go back and listen to the Vehicle of Consciousness episodes to understand this metaphor. But you can see, I can apply this metaphor to everything you're speaking of. We either have misprogrammed software. Well, guess what? You're the creator and you can reprogram it to reflect that which you really are, which is powerful. You might be fueling your avatar with a bunch of nonsense and it might be offline and it might be out of gas. You might be suppressing all those emotional beach balls and sucking up all of your energy and not connected to source. And your heart battery might not be getting what it needs through self-compassion, love, appreciation, connection, relationships, admiration, adoration, confidence, inspiration. And you're going to feel more disconnected from the web. The more you act in alignment with your divinity and more love and less fear, the easier it is to see the nudges and divinity and guidance around you. And the more you get in some ways. So you might start seeing repeating numbers, or you might have, an intuition that, oh, do you remember that guy I went in football with in college? And then all of a sudden they call you out of the blue. You get these little nudges to remind you, hey, I'm not going to mess with your free will. You get to be the creator. But remember, there's a little more to this game than you might remember. And reminding us and listening, everybody has that inner voice. We're just often taught to ignore it. Or we have a hard time, this is a big one. Everyone's like, I'll just listen to my intuition. I'm like, please don't. Which I would not be very popular for saying, but I'm like, let's also make sure that we understand the difference between the voices of our higher self, our inner guidance system connected to the higher self, and our unintegrated subconscious parts, our faulty computer software that was programmed from fear or emotional suboptimal experience in childhood, whatever our society believed at that time, all the things that's programmed our software before the age of 7. So, yeah.
What is the difference? How can men distinguish like which one is which?
That's a great question. If I could give you an easy formula for that, this game would get a lot easier and this simulation would be a lot easier to play. But I would say, I would ask yourself, is it loving? So your higher self sees everybody as a part of you. So I had somebody tell me once, my intuition told me that I should quit my job, which sometimes it might, leave my family and travel across the world, exchanging energy for living with people, which might be in the highest good of the system, but it might be his inner part being like, no, I want my authentic self, and doing a hostile takeover without considering, should I leave my wife and children behind? Or, is that my subconscious part that's been like, hey, yes, you have been forcing yourself into a life you don't prefer, but let's find a balance of all these things. So your higher self, your higher wisdom sees everybody as a part of itself. Now, that doesn't mean we never hurt anybody. That doesn't mean we stay in abusive relationships. So it doesn't mean that we can keep everybody happy and please everybody all the time. We can't. And to some extent, sometimes we do have to make self-centered decisions to prioritize ourselves, because there's nothing loving to ourselves or others about participating in codependent relationships or missing out on our potential. So it's a balance of, is this, what I like to look at, I like to call them win-wins, a win for me, a win for them, and a win for the universe. Even if me separating from that person or leaving that person is going to be temporarily painful, staying together is not optimal or painful either. So sometimes it's, do you want to burn to death or drown? I will admit, sometimes there are, choices that it doesn't mean everything is going to be always easy. It doesn't mean you're going to never have contrast. It means that you're going to experience things differently. And when your intuition kicks in, you're going to know, because it's loving. It's loving, and it creates decisions that sometimes are going to involve the discomfort of expansion, but they're not going to be I don't know how to say that. I guess you could ask yourself, is this a win-win for me, a win for the universe, a win for that person? But that doesn't mean that nobody's ever going to be hurt. It doesn't mean you're never going to be hurt. It doesn't mean that, and the more work you do on the magnetic masculinity blueprint, the more you do your parts work, the more you practice self-compassion, the more you eat your shit sandwiches so that you can level up in the game, the more you can trust that your signal is going to be pretty clear, because you've taken these parts out of the subconscious where you're not aware of them, where they're like, hey, do this, hey, do that. You're going to be giving them a seat at the table of your consciousness. They're going to be getting a chance to hold the talking stick. So you're going to be less likely to be in a hostile takeover of one of your little parts being like, yeah, we should cheat on her to get our needs met. Or, the more aware you are of your authentic wants, needs, boundaries, and values, and the more you are finding conscious ways to meet them, the less likely we are to experience fear intuition or subconscious parts intuition, because you're going to be more in alignment with your own divinity. Therefore, the information that you're accessing in the World Wide Web is going to be a higher quality of information. Think about it like, I'm on my computer here. If I was here Googling dark, suboptimal, unhealthy, toxic, violent things all day on my computer, and I'm typing into the browser of Google, what part of the algorithm is it going to connect me to when I start typing things in, right? You're still going to be accessing the database. There's no good or bad, right or wrong. It's just, this information is helpful and this information is not helpful. This information is love. This information is fear. But if you're practicing self-compassion and you're eating your shit sandwiches and you're genuinely trying to be a better person and you're willing to make mistakes and you're kind to others and you're kind to yourself and you're kind to other beings, chances are you're going to get access to a pretty cool part of the World Wide Web. The algorithms are going to tune you into things that are very helpful. Does that make sense?
And with this, I have a follow-up question, because you said that our higher self sees suboptimal experience. It doesn't see optimal experiences as bad. And question there would be, why is it that we might see them as bad? And what are the things that are getting in a way of being in alignment with that perspective that higher self has when it comes to things that either experiences or emotions or something like that we might not want to feel or experience?
Yeah, great question again. So we're multidimensional beings. So the first thing I would do is I would validate your human experience. What I used to do was I used to spiritually bypass. I used to jump right to the higher perspective and I'd be like, well, everything's in my highest good. I chose this incarnation. And I would invalidate my human 3D parts and perspectives. A lot of people do the opposite. They only get stuck in this perspective and they don't zoom out and look at the higher perspective. I like to try to do both. Now, there might be other dimensions in there. We could go into dimension theory and go way on a different tangent. But I think for practicality, we can look at it as an and. So this experience right now feels hard. I don't prefer it. But I tried it, and now I know I don't prefer it. Somehow, this is going to lead me to clarity on what I do and don't prefer. This physical body is providing me information about what I do and don't prefer, and what does and does not work, and what it does and does not need. Often, genuinely painful times can be made way worse if our thinking gets out of control and takes us on a little bit of a negative thought loop train. So on September 10th, 2024, I'm doing a presentation with one tool, a simple, effective 3-step tool that helps us take our stress from a 300 to a 30 by challenging our thoughts. So am I thinking thoughts with that contrast? An example, I got fired. Say I got fired, okay? And now I'm thinking thoughts like, oh, it's so unfair. Nobody appreciated me at work. I'm going to be ruined. My family must be ashamed of me. It's not my fault. I don't know why bad things always happen to me. Who would choose to live on this stupid planet? I think Sandy's an idiot for saying that. Like, I don't know. Like, we can acknowledge that, whoa, I am having a lot of emotions that are valid, and different parts of me feel very different about being fired. But perhaps your higher self is like, Austra, you've got to get out of that job, because that's like a 3 and we've got a 7 waiting for you, but you're stuck at a 3. Maybe we needed to get that out of the way so that you could start to pursue your life goal. Maybe that temporary discomfort is the discomfort of expansion, like we always talk about at the gym. If I go to the gym and I lift weights and I start feeling really uncomfortable, I'm going to make it mean I'm nailing it. We can start to trust. I know that everything's always working out for me. I know that there's going to be value in this in the future, but right now it's really hard. And then this is the time to trust, whether you trust God, trust the universe, trust your higher self, trust your intellect, whatever you need to trust. Start shifting that energy from victimhood or whatever, without invalidating yourself, into one of trust or compassion. And if you say things to yourself like, I'm ruined, my family's disappointed, the universe is out to get me, think about how those feel in your body. Think about how draining that is on your vehicle of consciousness. And it's valid that your body is and your parts are thinking that. You can say, yeah, guys, you have every right to feel that way. Thank you. But just like a child having a temper tantrum, it doesn't mean we believe it. Don't believe everything you think. We could start shifting that to, my family loves me. It's okay to make mistakes. Getting fired was traumatizing. Is there something I could have learned? Is there something I can learn from it? Maybe that environment was not representative enough of the divinity that I am. So it's starting to slowly reach for different thoughts and trying to zoom out of the ego perspective. Not that there's anything wrong with the ego. We need ego to be separate, but it's an and. We're multidimensional. We are individual, one of a kind, and connected to everything and everyone. And we can zoom out into that higher perspective and go, whew, my higher self is seeing things from a much more meta view. I can only see things right here. And I'm like, this is stupid. I wanted this to happen right here. But our higher self is like, oh, no, you don't. Trust me, this is going to be way better. But I got to nudge you to start getting you to go in any direction instead of just staying in this stuck holding pattern.
Follow-up question here would be about how to know what to trust, or how to know when you're actually being guided versus, like, even let's say in that situation that you said about being let go. It's how does it look or feel like when you're being guided? Is it a voice saying like, oh, listen, this was a 3, now you're gonna have a 7 coming? Like, do you actually hear that? Because I feel the challenge with that could be, how do you know if that's actually a path for you, even if it might not make sense in the moment for you and you should follow that, versus it might not be in alignment with you? How do you distinguish which one it is when it comes to kind of hearing what your higher self is telling to you or communicating to you or nudging you?
Well, you can trust that whatever's happening, it's happening for a reason. It might be so let's look at that example again of being fired or let go. It might be an indicator that you have a bunch of blind spots, a bunch of shit sandwiches to eat, and you got fired, and that getting fired is finally the catalyst where you're like, poke, poke, poke. Okay, fine. I've become self-centered, shut down. I'm a poor communicator. I'm really hard on myself, so I'm very hard on others. And whoa, did that experience ever teach me that? Or it could be you're stuck, you're people pleasing, you don't want to, you're like, I should stay at this job because I committed to it. But really your heart is like, oh my God, but we're going to do this. This is going to be so much fun. And you're like, no, we have to stick to this. So being curious and just trusting, taking some time to slow down, make sure that you're optimizing your vehicle of consciousness, make sure that you're nourishing it with really good foods, you're going for walks in nature, you're spending time with loved ones, you're speaking to yourself kindly and speaking to others kindly, and just remembering that multidimensional perspective, that from source perspective, everything's working out. There's always going to be other options. What can I learn from this? What is this here to teach me? What weakness is this here to guide me to strengthen? And I do sometimes my intuition comes through just a knowing. So everybody has superpowers. Everybody has psychic abilities, as they call it, or intuitive abilities. And some of my high-performing clients, entrepreneurs and CEOs and people that I work with, they really value my ability to help them develop some of those, what we might call spiritual gifts, and understanding what form your communication comes in. Some people get visions, which would be like, hey, I saw a truck, or I saw a something. Some people hear things like, hey, everything's going to be okay. I have had that in my life, where even in elementary school, a very calming voice would come to me. My whole body would become very relaxed and it would say, hey, it's okay. This is what's happening. You've chosen to come in. Like, it was like very specific, but I don't get that all the time. Some people just get a gut feeling. Oh, you could ask yourself, okay, am I going this way or this way? Oh, where do you get a gut feeling? And then you want to start asking the question, is this gut feeling, is this feeling of resistance because I'm afraid to make a change? Or is this resistance telling me don't go down that road? The best you can do is start to question yourself. Which choice would be more fun? Which choice would lead potentially to more connection with my wants, needs, boundaries, and values? And at least considering, how is this choice going to impact those around me? And then you make the best choice you can. And if you make a choice that you don't prefer, that's perfect, because now you know you don't prefer that, right? So think of life like a buffet. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet. And you go up and you try a flavor and you go, it's okay, it's a little bit salty. I don't know if I prefer that salty. It's fine. You're God. You get to choose. You try another flavor. You go, that tasted good. Oh, but it gave me diarrhea. So I don't think I'm going to do that one again. Then you try another one. And so these failures or these mishaps are part of our mastery or discernment of what we do and do not prefer. We can go, oh, I tried that. I did not prefer it. Now I know that I'm going to go in a different direction. Or I was being a self-centered jerk. And this was what turned out. This is what showed up divinely to help me be aware of where that festering wound was so that I could do the work. Now I've done the work. I've up-leveled. Now what am I going to do next?
What you are describing, it's kind of like, I don't say ideal scenario. I'm wondering what's the actual scenario for a lot of people, because this is how it should be. What is it that is actually happening for them, so that if they have it, they can identify that, oh, I might be having this instead of the other. Because what you explained, it makes sense. How you walk through those experiences and you're like, oh, that's a learning experience. Instead of seeing it, oh, this is a failure, or I'm a failure, and all the meanings and everything that get, and emotions that get attached to it. And that way, getting out of that alignment with kind of what the higher self sees that experience as. So like, how would it look like, or what would be the maybe reality for a lot of men listening? How would that look like before they get to that stage where they have that experience or that mindset about it?
It's going to take this episode starting to shift your thinking a little bit. It's going to take starting to be curious. It's going to staying skeptical, but try to find anything in your life where you're like, wait a minute, I think I was a little bit guided there. Or, okay, here's another way to look at it from source perspective. Or when I experienced those states where I was mostly in a meta cognitive state, and I saw everything from very high above, sort of from the perspective of the source. Imagine, men, you had a toddler, your little daughter who's 2. I don't know how old, I don't have children. I don't know how old children are when they learn to climb a staircase, but imagine your child is whatever age they are when they learn to climb a staircase. Or let's say you have a little puppy, okay? And you've got this huge staircase with 20 stairs. And they start walking up the staircase and they're like, in this lifetime, I want to walk up that staircase. And they start walking up the staircase and they get up to the 3rd stair and they fall down. You don't go, oh my God, you only got to the 3rd stair and then you fell down. You fell. What an idiot. Yeah, of course it hurts. Of course it should hurt. Look at that. You've got 17 more stairs to go. Oh God, this is so embarrassing. What a loser. Hurry up. No, you go, you go to the ground, up to the 3rd stair. And then the next time you kind of go maybe up to the 5th stair before you fall back down to the 3rd stair. And then now you know where the 5th stair is. So now you know what you're reaching for. So now I'm switching into this like a metaphor from source. So let me draw this. Pick my, so this is what growth looks like over time. Over time, there's a upward trend, but there's lots of ups and downs, right? So we might go to the 7th stair of the staircase and we go, oh, that was really good. Like when I've hit some of those states where I'm like, oh yeah, unconditional love, bliss, and joy all the time. Yes, please. And then I fall back down to the 3rd stair and I'm like, wait, what? Am I failing? Am I doing something wrong? But no, this time I didn't fall back down to the 1st stair. I fell back down to the 3rd stair. And now I have an emotional, mental, and spiritual experience of where I want to be. Now I have a lighthouse, a guiding post of where I want to go. Now I get to do the work. I get to do the work to go up and sustain the 7th stair. And then I get up there and I fall back down, but this time I only fall back down to the 5th stair and I'm not there very long. And the next time I climb up to the 9th stair. So that's how source or a higher self looks at us. They don't go, oh God, you fell and hurt your knee. Yeah, you did that. Yeah, we did that too because you're a jerk. It's like, no, it's like celebrating, cheering us on, being like, wow, you're amazing. Look what you're doing. And if you are God or you are source or you are, power, then it wouldn't carry you up the staircase, would it? Because you get to experience that journey of growth and expansion. You're never failing. You're always growing. You're growing from here to here to here to here. But we're often focusing on, as they say, perfection over progress. Whereas if we think of that stair metaphor, or we think of there's no way you can fail, you only go, even like say you cheat on somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, that was terrible. I felt horrible. Yeah, you felt horrible because it was out of alignment with who you truly are. What did you learn from it? Did you own and be accountable to how you impacted others? What did it teach you? And then did you grow and pivot? So you were here, you tried an experience. It was like, oh, sometimes we learn about where a boundary is by leaping right over that boundary and going, uh-oh, okay, there it was. Whoops, right? We swing the pendulum from here, we swing it all the way over here. And that helps inform us where our center is. So, but when we're in that pendulum swing, we tend to beat ourselves up, think the universe is blaming us. And so even when we do things that are suboptimal, it's trying that flavor of the buffet and going, oh, nope. Did you learn from it? And if you didn't learn from it, you're going to do it again and again and again. And until you learn to change that pattern, or you learn, what weaknesses is here to guide me to strengthen.
And follow-up question here would be, what is getting in a way of focusing more on how much progress you have made versus how far you are from perfection?
Shame. And our suboptimal programming, right? We want to reprogram the supercomputer in that vehicle of consciousness of yours to encourage you. So again, are you speaking to yourself like a child or a puppy climbing up a flight of stairs, which is how source or your higher self sees you? Or are you shaming them, judging them, and being like, ugh? And if you're doing that, that's okay. It's all just information. It's all just information. So if you notice you're beating yourself up and you notice that you are focusing on not being in perfection rather than focusing on your progress and observing that your progress looks like this and being compassionate and nurturing and cheering yourself through it, that's great. If you observe that, that means you're now in awareness. Congratulations, you're in awareness. Now you can do something about it.
And how can men find balance between the physical and spiritual? Because I feel like going into too much into one or the other, it can be kind of misaligning, but it can sometimes be comforting to go just in one or just in the other.
Escapism. So again, I think in order to experience all those results that we desire, that all of us desire, to have a fulfilling life where we're energized, confident, clarity, inspired, inspiring to others, whatever that looks like for you, whether that means being a stay-at-home dad or starting a $5 billion company, whatever that looks like to you, balancing all of your different systems, that multidimensional self, making sure that they're all in alignment and balance, just makes sense. That's how we're most powerful. That's how we're most energized. That's when we're most inspired. And that's why I created the Magnetic Masculinity Blueprint, to help us find practical tools and strategies with metaphors we already know. A lot of these metaphors that Austra and I have been sharing are already doing a lot of the work for you. They're reprogramming how your mind thinks. And we have been very careful about this. And we talk a lot behind scenes about this to help all of you listening just sort of start reframing how you think about yourself and others. So yeah, you're already crushing it.
And is there anything else that you want to add when it comes to multidimensional self? Because this is quite unique topic and quite packed as well. And there's many directions, I feel, or many doors that we can open within it that might have not been opened as often or as much.
Cool. Well, I think we'll just keep exploring this topic until we feel that all the rabbit holes have been dove down. And I would encourage anybody listening to ask any questions. I learn new things every day. Nothing I say is a fact. Everything I say are metaphors used to describe what I've experienced. And if you're skeptical, I probably wouldn't believe a lot of the things that I believe if I didn't firsthand experience them. But I would invite you to look back at humanity. And if you are, if you like a lot of logic and facts, which I do, then I would encourage you to read works like My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell, who will be featured on our podcast. He is a NASA physicist who spent 30 years exploring consciousness and creating a very thorough new theory of everything that helps us understand the anomalies that Einstein and other physicists of the time called spooky physics or paranormal, or things that just meant that our current Newtonian paradigm and understanding, which was so different than religion, was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, as was that piece of the puzzle. Now we kind of understand what the puzzle looks like and where the different pieces fit in. But that involves us really challenging our old thought patterns and finding practical ways, like the magnetic masculinity blueprint we've discussed in these 40 some odd episodes, to help us evolve and adapt to this new big expansion that's happening right now. And please send us any questions. And I'll do my best to answer them. Or if I don't know, I'll just tell you I don't know, or I'll try to find out the information. Or I'll offer you, one thing I often do is I say, here are 3 different things that are common ways of looking at this, or here are 3 different perspectives. Which one resonates to you? Because I assume in all moments that I don't have all the answers, and that keeps me open and curious and learning and expanding. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's Multidimensional Man. And when it comes to questions, you can also comment them if you watch on YouTube below. And same thing on any platform you're listening to. You should have a link in show notes where you can submit any questions so that you can get Sandy answering those as well.
Yeah, and please like and subscribe, and yeah, and let us know if you have any questions, but also keep your eye out, because I'm going to be doing monthly live trainings where we look at different components from different aspects of our vehicle of consciousness, which, again, if you're not super familiar with it, I invite you to go back and listen to that, because that will help you. It's not a fact of how humans are. It is a model that I created to help you more quickly diagnose and repair when something in your life is not exactly as you prefer, and to help you expand into your full potential and your most magnetic life.
All right, so we will see you next week.
Bye for now.